Hey, how you doing? Arthur Wu here. And today's question is, do I need a light meter? I'm gonna tell you the answer right now. It depends. I know, none of us like that answer. It depends. It'd be so much easier if I just told you whether or not you should go out and buy a light meter. But I really think it does depend on the type of stuff that you're shooting. So the first couple of years, I was shooting just kind of like everything to kind of, get experience, try to figure out what I really wanted to do. And a lot of it was run and gun type of stuff. So documentary style stuff, events type of stuff. Quite frankly, the camera's histogram was more than good enough to let me know if something was properly exposed or overexposed or underexposed. Most of these digital cameras nowadays have that little histogram or some waveforms that will let you know where your image is approximately. So for those types of shoots where you're kind of running around, you don't really have time to take readings, you don't have time to set up, I don't think you need a light meter. Now some people would disagree with me, but I think your camera's histogram is gonna do you just fine. And I've shot so many shoots like that, people continue to hire me. So, it's not the end of the world if you don't use a light meter on those. When do you need a light meter? It wasn't until I started getting hired for the bigger studio jobs that a light meter started coming into play. And because the light meter is something, as a tool that's gonna give you repeatable results. Specifically in studio, if you're lighting like a white cyc, or if you're lighting any colored cyc, or a green or a blue screen. Because what's gonna happen is you're gonna need to have the lighting ratios correct in order for the image to look good. So that way when they take it into post, the visual effects guys aren't gonna be like, what the hell is this DP doing? I'm gonna need to do so much work to fix everything that this guy did. No, you don't want that, because then you're gonna be known as the dude who doesn't know how to shoot the green screen or the white side. You want them to be able to take the footage in post and be like, wow, this thing is super clean. That comes as a result of knowing your lighting ratios. And the only way you can really tell that, in my opinion, is by using the light meter. Say you're lighting a green screen, for instance, right? You're exposing properly for the talent that's in front of the camera. So in this case, if I know I'm shooting at ISO 800, because that's what red is, and sometimes you want to shoot Alexa on 800, and then your shutter is if you're shooting at 24 frames, your shutter is going to be 48th or 50th of a second, depending on what you like. And so the only thing really left is the aperture. So really, you're getting a measure of how wide your lens should be open. So if I'm lighting like this, I'm going to point my light meter here, and I know that I'm getting an f5.6. So typically, I like to kind of boost the aperture one stop open to get the quote unquote proper exposure. So I'm gonna be shooting approximately an f4, and that's what the lens is set at. So if I'm shooting that, I want if I'm shooting me at an f4 and I'm shooting a green screen, I'm gonna want the green screen slightly underexposed because, in my experience, that's what works well, that's what keys out well. So, if I'm an f4 on me, I want the green screen to be at f2 because that's 2 stops under. How are you gonna know that with just your camera's histogram? You're not gonna know that. The light meter is the only tool that's gonna be able to tell you, okay, you're exactly 2 stops under. Now what I can do is I can tell my gaffer, we're exposed for f4, I want this 2 stops under exposure. And then he can take his light meter, set up whatever lights, and then tell me, hey, it's ready, check it out, let me know what you think. And without the light meter, it just makes your job a lot harder. So, repeatable results, that's when you need a light meter. Second thing, if you're going location scouting and you don't have access to your camera, maybe it's a sensitive area, they don't want you to bring your camera out there yet. Or maybe you're like me, you rent cameras a lot of times and you don't have a little DSLR to kind of help you with the exposure. Well, that's when this little thing comes in handy. You can go out to your location, let's say it's a restaurant, right? And say you have window light coming through the window, and then you have ambient light from above. Maybe it's like a little lamp or something, or series of bulbs. And the director and the producer look at you and say, well, what do you need in this situation to make this happen? And if you don't have your light meter or a camera, you're gonna be like, oh, well, I gotta go back and think about it. Not a very impressive answer. But if you had this, or maybe a camera, but I would say more likely a light meter, you can take a reading from the window and you can say, oh, well, window at this time of day, exposed at f11, but in here we're only exposed at f4, and there's not much ambient light coming out because that's only giving us 1.4. I think I'm going to need a couple of Kinos, maybe like a 750, or maybe like an HMI, whatever light works for you, whatever you like using. Maybe we'll put some soaks in front to block out 2 stops of light. That way we can bring in less lights. And when you start communicating this way, when you start knowing what these ratios are and the light that's coming in, when you see that look on someone's face where they know that you know what you're talking about, that's priceless. And it's simply just using your tools. Light meter is just another tool. Again, if you're shooting like run and gun type of stuff, documentary, all these types of things where you don't have the time to necessarily set up, then I think it's not as necessary to use a light meter. You can use the histogram, you'll be fine. But if you have time to set up, if you're going on a location scout, if you're in studio and you need repeatable results, I think the light meter is absolutely necessary. That's my opinion. Of course, some people will say no, some people will say yes. It doesn't really matter. Do what works for you. Now let's talk a little bit about light meters. Which one should you get? In my opinion, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I have the L758 Cine from Sekonic because it has some of the more features than the standard light meter. You can get a really simple one for $200-300 and it'll serve you well for a long time. It doesn't really matter if you get like the iPhone looking ones that have like the whole digital display, or if you get like the the 1980 calculator like ones like I have here. And then a couple of other things. Do you want the incident meter and a spot meter, or do you just need one or the other? I hope that was helpful. Again, any questions, post them below and I'll try to answer them as well as I can. And for more reviews and tips, subscribe to this channel and visit arthurwu.com. All right, guys, peace.